if one person hears this and says, that's sounds like what's happening to me too, and allows them to kind of get over that disbelief, to understand that this kind of thing can happen in the human brain, to like kind of block it out or whatever happens, that it's actually plausible and that they could move on and heal faster than the amount of time it took me. And that's kind of what makes it worth it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Or if this is your first time joining in, thank you for being with us. This podcast is a safe space for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault to share their stories and connect with others who've been through similar experiences. I believe that sharing our stories is the first step to healing, and my hope is that the SAS podcast will help victims and survivors feel less alone and more empowered. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Pod Vlog studio in St. George, Utah, and I'm here each week to provide a platform for victims and survivors to tell their story, and for experts and professionals to offer insights and information to help us all on our healing path, and to provide an education on being trauma-informed in order to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape or sexual assault. If you are a victim, survivor, or know someone who is, or if you investigate or prosecute rape or sexual assault cases, or if you provide treatment, counseling, or interact with victims or survivors of rape or sexual assault in any capacity, I urge you to listen to this podcast. Remember, you are not alone, and we are all here to support you. Hey, it's good to have you back with me. I'm glad you're here, mainly because this week's guest is someone that I think really will make an impact on many, many lives. As you listen to this, I want you to pay close attention to not only the story and the dynamics and the impacts that were made because of this rape, but listen to what's behind this story. And that is the sheer strength and fortitude and desire to share this story for no other purpose than to help other victims and survivors of rape. This week's guest is Katie Stewart. Katie was brave enough to respond to my invitation to email me and discuss the possibility of being on this show. After a long conversation and many emails back and forth, Katie is ready to have this episode published. Kudos and honor and thanks to Katie for all of her bravery and fortitude in doing this show. Here's Katie. Katie Stewart, it is so nice to have you with us. I am honored that you are here. Just for the listening audience, Katie is one of the people who emailed me in response to my invitation to have my listeners, when they feel ready, to be on this show. And she did that. She emailed me. She told me her story in writing. I got in touch with her. We had a good long discussion, and Katie feels ready and empowered and wants to tell her story. So that's why Katie's here with me today. Thank you, Katie, for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Dave. Hi, I live in California. I have 2 kids and a lovely family. And from the outside, you would have no idea that I was struggling the way that I was with what happened. I have a lovely, lovely life, and some really beautiful things have come out of what's happened. And I just have a beautiful support system. And up until about 1.5 years ago, I was a scientist for the federal government. I'm really anxious to be here, Dave, but I'm really happy to have a chance to share my story, because if I had heard somebody's story like mine when I was going through the healing process, that would have made it so much easier. And I just don't want other people to suffer in the way that I did with doubting myself because of the circumstances of the story. So even though it's very hard to talk about publicly or privately, I'm really grateful for the chance to do this.
Yeah. You mentioned the pain involved and the doubting. That's been going on for a long time, and we'll get into that, but it's certainly understandable for those of us in this realm that know the neuroscience of trauma, what's going on, and it's so helpful and beneficial and courageous of you to want to help other people with that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Katie, are you able to tell us about your experience?
Yeah, I am, Dave. As I kind of explained, the way I think about it is broken up into kind of what I factually remember, which does not include the rape, and then kind of what's happened in the 25 ensuing years. It's helped me put together the pieces of what happened. It's a two-part story. There's sort of like up until what happened, and then like figuring out the details to the level that I know them right now, which is not very detailed at all. The situation, kind of going back to what I factually remember, is that I'm 45 now, and when I was 19 years old, so 25 years ago, I went to Greece to be a nanny for the family of my mom's coworker. We kind of split up the summer into two places. We first started out on a small island at my mom's coworker's late mom's house. We were staying on the small island. I have great memories from that time. We were there for about a month. I remember a lot of things from that time. And that's important because later I don't remember anything. And then about halfway through the summer, we moved to his father's house on the island of Rhodes. It's been kind of a slow process for me to piece together what happened. But when we got to the grandfather's house, his wife was there. Then at some point she left and was not there anymore. And one night the grandfather came into my room and attempted to sleep with me, but left really easily when I said, I basically said goodnight very firmly and turned away. I spent the rest of the night really scared and listening for him to come back. So I kind of remember lying in the crack, like there was the bed and then a crack and then the wall. And so I kind of laid in the crack between the bed and the wall so that I could kind of slip down onto the floor where he couldn't get to me. He didn't come back the rest of the night. And I was really scared to go downstairs the next morning because I didn't know how he would react to me because he had shown an angry streak for little things before. Prior to this, he made several inappropriate comments to me that I kind of brushed off. I went downstairs and I was nervous, not knowing how he would react. And there was a strange young man, probably like 19 years old or 20 years old, in the kitchen. He introduced me to him as, this is Katie, she does not like men. And I kind of, at that point, I thought it was kind of funny. So it was actually like a relief at that point because I thought okay, well, he just thinks that I don't like men. And so he's going to leave me alone. And it's just kind of a funny, haha kind of thing. So there was a little bit of relief. I still was really scared and I didn't feel safe being there. The timeline's a little sketchy, but I'm pretty sure it was that same morning that I asked if I could kind of step away from the family that I was nannying for a little bit. I asked if I could go sit on the beach by myself. I'm pretty sure that I went there to try to figure out what I should do about the situation because I was there with this family, helping them, and I didn't feel safe and I wanted to ask to go home. But then I kind of thought about it and I didn't want to ruin kind of the relationship between the father and his dad, and I didn't want to ruin the vacation, so I decided that I would stay. And a man came up and approached me on the beach, and he asked me if I would please come be a model for the hotel, which was right next to the beach. So the grandfather's house was bordering the beach, and next to that was a hotel. And so the guy came up and asked me if I would be a model for their promotional material. And I kind of pointed to the hotel behind him. I said no, because I didn't want to do it. I'm not that kind of person in terms of I don't like to put myself out there and I wouldn't be interested in the kind of modeling job at all, not even as a 19-year-old. But I said no. And I told him, I'm not a model. And he said, it's okay, you'll be fine. And I said, I don't really have the right clothes to wear. And he said, it's okay, you can wear what you're wearing. Which I don't know what I was wearing. That's not something that I can remember. And I came up with lots of other reasons. I don't know how to do my hair. It's fine. You'll be fine. Just come as you are. And I still kept saying no. And then he switched his tactics and he said something along the lines of, please, I really need somebody. Our model canceled. Our photographer's on the way. I'm going to lose my job if you don't do this for me. He got me kind of I like to help people. It's how I was raised. Whatever I want doesn't really matter when somebody else needs help. And so I was feeling really pressured at this point because who am I to make this poor guy lose his job? Then kind of had this realization, oh, you know what? There's somebody else who needs me. And so I told him, no, I can't do it because I'm actually, here nannying for somebody. And the family might need me to watch the kids. And I pointed to the house next to the beach where we were. And he said, oh, well, that's okay. Go back and ask them if you can come. And then I don't remember if he wrote the room number down on a piece of paper or if he already had it, but he handed me a piece of paper with the room number on it. And he said, come back at 1 if the family says you can do it. And I'm like, okay. So I leave. And at that point, like, I think I'm out of it. Like, I think I have a good excuse because the family is going to want me to watch their kids. And even if not, like, surely the mother of the children will think like, no, this is a terrible idea. Like, no, you should not do that. And so I thought that I was out of it, that I had an excuse that relied on, somebody else needing me or somebody else saying, don't do it. But I went back to the house and I talked to the mom of the children that I was watching. And she said, oh, no, you should do it. It'll be fun. And so at that point, like, it wasn't enough for me to say, well, I don't want to do it. Like, I felt stuck, like I have to go do this. So I do remember getting ready in the bathroom downstairs. I do remember feeling kind of like very self-conscious and that I didn't know how to like make myself look right for them. And so I just kind of really remember getting ready to go. And then I remember leaving the house. I remember what door I walked through. I remember walking down the path to the beach. I remember walking up the stairs to the hotel. It was like one of those hotels that has exterior stairs going up to the room where I was supposed to go. And I don't really remember if the door was open or if I knocked or how that all happened. But I remember opening the door. It was kind of on the other side of the door frame. There was a bed. And there was the bedside table to the right of the bed. And then just on the other side of the bed, there were 3 men. One of them was the one that was at the beach trying to get me to go there. And I remember then even being really surprised because all 3 men were lined up in a row, standing up, waiting for me, like they knew that I was coming. Like, I didn't suspect anything at the time. I was still like, no, I'm here to model, right? I'm here to help these guys. But I remember at that time thinking, this is really strange that they are standing here waiting for me. Like, they shouldn't know that I'm coming. I didn't tell him I was coming. And so the one that had talked to me on the beach had me lay down on the bed and gave me the phone and gave me the hotel brochure and asked me to start acting like I was talking to a friend, like looking at the hotel materials, looking all excited. And I remember, I don't know why this detail is so bothersome to me, but I remember one of them saying that he had to leave and would be right back, that he was going to go get something, because there was like another door that led to the inside of the hotel. So he left and at some point came back. One of the guys walked around taking pictures. At some point, they got angry with me because I was too tense and they wanted me to relax. And that's the moment where I don't remember anything anymore. Sorry. It's funny because I don't, I have not cried when I've been in therapy talking about this because it's been so broken up, like over like a 5-year period of these pieces coming together. So it's funny to be so emotional right now because I'm normally not.
Have you ever told it in like a stream like this?
No, I haven't.
So yeah, that's gotta be.
Yeah. So I've mentioned that I have this kind of variation of the human brain that does not see images or really any sensory information it's not retrievable. So, and that's true for anything. So there's not a single day of my life where I can tell you any detail of what's happening externally. I'm
trying to learn more about this aphantasia. Mm-hmm. Am I saying it right?
I have no idea. I think aphantasia or aphantasia.
And I know it exists. After you mentioned it in your first email, I looked it up and was doing a little bit of research, not in depth, just kind of reading a couple of different articles about it and how rare it is. You've said that it doesn't allow you to have sensory recall, but you do recall things like walking into the room and where they were standing, how they were standing.
So there seems to be different memory systems and different processing systems. And I'm sure you know this for senses versus facial orientation. So all of my memories, whether they're traumatic or not traumatic, only consist of things that I have kind of logged factually. So I've said, oh, that person is wearing a blue shirt. That's a nice color blue. Like if I actually say that in my head, then I can remember that, but I cannot see the blue shirt. Any of that kind of sensory input kind of gets lost and can't be retrieved. Like I think it's there. It's just that can't form an image of it.
Right.
But in the researchers who are studying aphantasia, they believe that it's protective against PTSD because it affects visual imagery. My experience has been that I am still prone to intrusive images and occasionally intrusive smell and intrusive, and they don't come with pictures. generally, I mean, so the images come with pictures, obviously, but like the other stuff doesn't come with pictures. So it's a very complicated process of putting together the pieces and understanding what's happening. So there's the intrusive stuff. There's the spatial orientation, which is how I remember all of my memories, traumatic or non-traumatic. That's the information that I have available. And then body sensations and body position are still, those memories are still somewhat intact as well.
That's interesting. I did see some drawings, for instance, in the little bit of research that I did of somebody who doesn't suffer from aphantasia drawing, say, a room like with a fireplace and a bed and a couch and a picture on the wall and things like that. And it just matches so precisely with what you're saying, where a person with aphantasia draws these like squares and actually labels things: bed, fireplace.
Yeah, that's how my memory is. It's like, okay, I'm walking into the room, here's the bed, and I don't know what the bed looks like. I just know the bed is here, and I could draw it in proportion to the rest of the room. And here's the bedside table. I don't know what it looked like. Here's the phone. I don't know what color the phone was or what type of phone it was. And then there's the men. I didn't know that this was a thing until, just a handful of years ago. That's true for a lot of people with this condition, where we just think that when somebody says, okay, picture in your mind a tree, I thought it was a figure of speech. Like, I did not know anybody had that power.
Yeah. I mean, if you have that condition, you have nothing to compare it to. How would you know any different? Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It
does affect memory. It does severely limit the amount of information that I have available to make sense of what happened. And then on top of that, of course, there's some severe dissociation. I don't know for sure, but I'm 95% certain that I was drugged.
Not knowing for sure, but feeling quite confident. It seems to me from both your email and in our discussion, the timing for that is just not there at all. You don't know when that would have occurred or how that would have occurred. It just, that based on circumstances.
Based on circumstances, based on the nature of the memory cutoff and what was being said to me at the time, the sensations that have returned as I've tried to kind of process this, all of those things strongly suggest that there were drugs involved. There is a point in time right after they tell me that I need to relax, that it feels like there is a memory there that I can't get to. I'm not sure, and I can't with certainty. I think there's a very complex set of factors at play, regardless.
Yeah, for sure.
It's probably helpful for law enforcement and prosecutors and other people in the justice system to understand what aphantasia is, and that it does affect memory, and that there's certain pieces of information that people just simply cannot recall, and it doesn't mean that it's not true or that they're not there. Or weren't there, but it's just normal. It's just a normal variation, and most people with it don't know that it is a thing that they have. So they might sound like they're lying, that they're making stuff up because they don't have details that other people would have.
Right. It's so fragmented and vague, but that matches even with people who don't experience aphantasia, that trauma just does that anyway. It interferes with memory.
The memories up until that point are typical of what I would have for any kind of situation, traumatic or non-traumatic. Yeah. And then at that point where everything cuts out, then that is some unknown combination of trauma and dissociation and possible drugs.
Like it exacerbates an already different kind of memory system to begin with, different from the population who do not experience aphantasia, with those other elements in their drugs and trauma. And obviously, the experience you've had then is not nearly as easily recalled.
The way that it feels is like there was like camera film in my brain recording what was happening, in the way that my brain records things. Then like just the film ran out. Then at some point it got reloaded again. And at that point, they're telling me that I'm all done and I can go. And I remember at that time, it felt very strange. It felt very abrupt. I was very confused. It felt like I just got there, but then it also didn't feel like I just got there. So it was very strange. It was a very strange sensation. So I was confused and I was like, oh, okay. And I remember that I felt super ashamed And the way I remembered that like shame was that I wasn't what they needed me to be. And like I let them down and I wasn't a good model. And that's why they were asking me to go. So I remember that confusion. I remember that shame. I remember standing at the door of the hotel room, and I don't remember anything after that. I didn't remember really anything for the rest of the summer, with just the exception of a couple brief moments in time. And I didn't remember leaving Greece. I didn't remember going back home. I didn't remember going back to college at the end of the summer. And pretty much the next 6 months, I have no memory of what happened in my life, just generally. I never knew or thought that something happened while I was in that hotel room modeling. That was not something that crossed my mind. And I know that it might sound implausible that given the number of men that were in the room, that if something happened, that I wouldn't know that something had happened. It's in a way, it seems implausible to me too, but I don't actually remember like going to bed that night, and I don't remember waking up the next morning, and I don't remember anything. So I don't know what happened in my head at that point in time. Also, just like, I don't want to get into detail about other things that aren't related to this topic, but the way that I grew up with a severely mentally ill single mom, my perception of what was happening with myself was always kind of in doubt. Like if I was injured, I would be told that it can't hurt, it can't possibly hurt, and not be taken to the doctor. So I just kind of grew up like thinking like, if I think something is wrong, I'm wrong, that there's something wrong. So there's a lot of doubt my whole life about kind of my perception of things. So it's very plausible in kind of the circumstances of the way that my brain worked at that period of time, that I would wake up, notice something wrong, and immediately think that I am wrong, that there's something wrong. So I'll just leave that at that. I went about my life not thinking about what happened in the hotel room, and not thinking that, like, I didn't think anything had happened at all. I had massive symptoms though, and I was at a college for international studies, and I kind of like suddenly just kind of fled my college and my degree and left it behind because it would have required me to travel. I didn't really understand what was at play, like why I was making that decision, other than that I just needed to not. And so I left and came home. I don't want to go into like a lot of details about the symptoms, but a lot of unexplained gynecological symptoms, very severe ones that had no explanation, a lot of physical body pain, migraines and stomach issues and muscle aches and not being able to feel body parts, just a lot of issues with intimacy. And I suffered with these symptoms for, the next 20 years, just blaming myself. Like, there is something wrong with me. Not that something bad happened to me, but just I messed up. I'm crazy. There's something wrong with me. All of those kinds of thoughts that I think a lot of survivors do have. I just didn't connect it back to anything happening. Yeah. So it's very confusing and very difficult. The good thing about that is that because I thought it was just me, like something wrong with me, I just kept pushing myself forward in life. I got a science degree, got a great job, got a great husband, had wonderful kids. Like, I kept pushing through, but those symptoms were there the entire time. And then, like, in the back of my mind, I knew something somewhere had happened, but I did not connect it back to what happened in the hotel. It's just, I was like, okay, there's like too many symptoms. It's just too much. Like, I knew something happened, but I didn't really give it any thought. I just kind of kept going forward in life. And then about 5 years ago, I don't really 100% know why, but I started getting a lot of really intrusive symptoms. Well, they started out as, I was calling them hallucinations, which now that I know what happened is really cruel because they weren't hallucinations and it wasn't crazy. They were flashbacks. So I was getting flashbacks, but I didn't know that they were flashbacks. I was getting very graphic and very detailed intrusive images. There wasn't a lot of like detail in terms of context around what was happening, but like I would wake up at night and there would be a very detailed penis, like right in my face, like it very incredibly detailed, and never seen an image in my face, like in my mind before. And all of a sudden I'm getting these intrusive images. Again, there's not a lot of context, like with the exception of one flashback, there were never any faces involved. So they would be either just disembodied penises or they would be people from the neck down. But it was detailed enough that I could tell that they were different, like each one was a different body. So it was incredibly disturbing because I didn't understand what was happening. I understood kind of the genre of what was happening. Like I was like, okay, like this is trying to tell me about a sexual assault, but I don't understand like what it is. And I don't know what the story is. And I don't know why there are so many different people. And so then that made me doubt myself even more because I was seeing so many different ones. So that made me feel very crazy. And then I was getting triggered a lot when I was out in public. So one really extreme example was I tried a yoga class to kind of calm my nerves and what was happening with the images and stuff. I was laying on my yoga mat. People were warming up around me. And all of a sudden I started to hear the sound of the men in the class inhaling. And there were 3 of them around me. I wasn't like really aware of their presence, but the breathing, it was like it was being kind of like piped into my brain through like a microphone. It was incredibly loud. And I just, every time they would inhale, I would start shaking and crying. I had no idea what was happening. I was terrified to a level that I like don't have any recollection of ever being that terrified in my life. I was just laying on a mat in a yoga class. And I was just terrified. And like, as these reactions were happening, the thought in my head was, this is the sound of men wanting to have sex with me. And I did not for 1 minute have that thought about what was happening around me. I felt perfectly safe in the class. I did not think anybody wanted to do anything with me. They were just there to do yoga. So I didn't believe that, but that was a thought that was there along with all of those reactions to that sound. So things like that were happening and they were piling up over a period of like about 3 years. And none of them had enough detail for me to understand what was happening until one day I had a flashback that included a face and it included me laying on the hotel bed in a different position than I recall being in from my memory. And I recognized the man from the beach. And then there was another one of the guys on the other side of me. And sorry, I should say, I also heard stuff in my head when that happened, including myself shrieking rape, even though I was not thinking rape. I was just like blown away by like the image and the flashback being in my head. Like I was just like, whoa, what's this? Like, I don't remember being here and I don't remember being in this position and what's happening. And then I just heard that word come, not outside of my brain, but it was inside my brain. It played like an audio recording, like somebody had pressed play on a tape recorder and just let my voice out. And so at that point, I kind of knew what all of these things were telling me. I still doubted myself for another 2 years. I didn't tell my therapist about that flashback for a year. And I'm kind of forgetting now too, there were other things. I was having a lot of body sensations and pains, very disturbing sensations of my arms being pinned together and lifted over my head. So all of these things were just adding up. And I finally knew kind of what picture they were painting and that it had to do with that hotel room. And it took me another 2 years from that point for I guess all the pieces to come together for me to understand that the grandfather had set it up and that I was gang raped and that this had all really actually happened. And again, like the doubt was debilitating. Like it really kept me frozen in place and unable to process anything that had happened, because anytime we would start to go there and process it, like that voice of doubt would come up and I'd be like, oh, I'm crazy. I'm making this up. This can't be true. Like I wouldn't possibly forget about that. They really just needed a model. Like I had all of these stories in my head that I was telling myself, presumably like my brain's way of protecting myself from knowing what had happened. And it wasn't until, there was still doubt after this point too, but I remember I was in therapy one day and I was recalling some of the images that I had seen and feeling really crazy because I said to my therapist, I said, it would be believable if I only had one penis in my head. Like if I was always seeing the image of one, but there's 3. And I felt like that made me sound crazy. And then I stopped and I was like, oh, there's 3 because there were 3 men in the room with me. I remembered back to like being triggered in the yoga class and, oh, there were 3 men breathing around me in the yoga class. And kind of at that point, it was like almost instantaneous where all of the pieces that my brain had been collecting and trying to get me for 5 years, like all of them just fell into place immediately. And despite that, there are still moments of doubt where I think this sounds unbelievable, or I must just really be anxious and be making all of these things happen. But I know with aphantasia, I don't have the capability to make these images happen. I can't do that.
Right.
And so it's kind of really only been maybe 6 months. This happened 25 years ago. And it's only been about 6 months that I've been able to accept that it happened, talk about it like it happened, tell people that it happened. Like my husband, I only told him about 7 months ago. And that was incredibly difficult because I was convinced that as soon as I opened my mouth and told him, that all of a sudden, like the memories would fill in and I would remember, oh, nothing happened, right? I was just there to model. And so I was terrified to tell anybody. It's been a really difficult process getting to that point where I could spend doubt long enough to actually start to process it and heal. And I know that maybe people listening to the way that my voice sounds right now, it probably doesn't sound like I'm healed, but I will say since that point in time, 6 or 7 months ago, I have probably healed my symptoms by like 90%. I don't have intrusive images or nightmares. I occasionally do still have body flashbacks. The proof to me in my mind, like when I need to prove it to myself, is I could not get rid of these symptoms until I accepted that it happened and started to heal and process it. Like I could not heal. And as soon as I did that, all of that stuff went away. And to me, that's the proof that I need to feel comfortable. And I guess the reason I'm doing this, even though I'm obviously extremely uncomfortable talking about it, is I was frozen in place and time for 25 years and experiencing extreme symptoms. And I had no ability to understand or accept what was happening. And I couldn't heal. And if one person hears this and says, that sounds like what's happening to me too, and allows them to kind of get over that disbelief to understand that this kind of thing can happen in the human brain, to like kind of block it out or whatever happens, that it's actually plausible and that they could move on and heal faster than the amount of time it took me. And that's kind of what makes it worth it to me to sit here and do this, even though I am an extremely private person. So I'm sorry, I talked a whole lot just there.
You have nothing to apologize for, number one. Number two, I want to express my sincere sorrow and empathy to you for the experience that you've been through, but to simultaneously thank you for your courage and strength in finding the ability to email me and then actually be here today and tell your experience. Hey, SAS listeners, we're very fortunate to have with us in the studio today Sierra Lancaster. Sierra is a representative of our sponsor, Unique Makeup and Beauty Products. Welcome, Sierra. I'm glad you're here.
Hi, happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about Unique.
Unique is an awesome company. Our mission is to uplift, empower, and validate women. We have everything from makeup, skincare, collagen, basically any beauty item you're going to want.
Awesome. And how long have you been involved with Unique?
I started with Unique in September of 2019. I had a friend who was involved. She was a presenter, and I just watched her transformation and how confident she became, and I loved it, and I wanted to be able to do that for myself and to help other women with that.
I love hearing that. And the reason I chose Unique as our sponsor is because there's a tie between what SAS, Sex Assault Survivor Stories podcast, is doing and what Unique is doing. Tell us a little bit about that connection and why Unique and SAS go together.
Yeah, so SAPREA is the foundation that goes along with Unique. SAPREA exists to liberate individuals and society from child sexual abuse and its lasting impacts. 1 in 5 children in the United States are sexually abused before the age of 18, which needs to stop. And so SAPREA is there to help prevent that and also to offer hope and healing for those who have experienced it.
And what does SAPREA offer to your clients?
SAPREA has a retreat. It's called the SAPREA Retreat. This is a 4-day retreat that survivors can go to get the help that they need to continue their healing process. And then afterwards, they are given resources like therapists and phone calls and support groups that help them to continue with their healing.
So if our listeners want to know more about that, can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can reach me or they can go to saprea.org and we can include my contact in the show notes. They can reach out to me and it is a free retreat for survivors. It's all provided through donations. And so there's donations that you can, of course, make just monetary donations, or any purchase from my website gets 10% of the profits are donated directly to the SAPREA Foundation.
That's great. One of the things that I think I'm really impressed with, you mentioned earlier, the idea of how Unique has helped your confidence.
And that leads me to asking you about your confidence growth and the fact that you've just started a podcast yourself.
Yes, I have. So it's called Confidently Beautiful with Sierra. And the purpose of that podcast is just to show everyone that they already have the confidence inside them and we just need to bring it out.
I love that. Thank you again for being here.
Yep, of course.
We'll have you back sometime.
Sounds good.
It's amazing that so much of what you're talking about falls right into place with the neuroscience that I've been taught and that I've studied and the experiences that others have talked about. I do know that a lot of what you're going through is trauma response. That doesn't make it easier, but I think when people hear your story and understand the neuroscience that goes with it, those somatic psychophysiological responses are so normal, and not normal in the sense that we should expect them, but normal in the sense that that's what our brains do. Katie, let me ask you, at what point did you start therapy, and under what circumstances were you led to get into therapy?
Did not get into therapy to deal with this. I'm very glad that I'm in therapy to deal with this. If I had known that this was here, I may not have had the courage to go. I went because I was providing elder care and hospice care for my mom at the time. And it was very difficult circumstances. And there's other traumas there that I don't want to get into on this podcast, but I thought that I was going to therapy for maybe 3 months max, just to figure out how to deal with the circumstance that I found myself in. And I think what happened and why some of this stuff started to open up was I basically was frozen. I had no ability to know that things were not okay. I had no ability to recognize that things were not okay. I didn't know I was dissociating on a regular basis. I laid in bed every night, completely curled up in the fetal position, just as tense as could be from head to toe. And so there was no ability for me to even relax enough to recognize anything that was happening or to allow myself to feel it. And I think what happened was in therapy, I started to learn things like mindfulness and recognizing like that there's actually stuff happening in my body, that like, oh, I can feel emotions, right? And I can feel things. Yeah, I can just feel things happening. I didn't have any emotions. I had no idea anything was wrong, honestly. And so just that ability to like, the training that happened in therapy is like learning how to pay attention to what's happening inside. I think that's kind of what allowed some of these things to start to trickle out. And cautious because I know that there, historically has been concern with therapists like implanting memories in people's heads. And I want to assure anybody listening that that is absolutely not what happened. We were both very confused by what was happening because the pieces that were coming out were so limited in scope and so spread apart and without any context. So it was this 5-year process of just trying to gather these puzzle pieces and make sense of them, not with any intention of trying to like uncover something, but they just kept happening. And, for a long time, we would think stuff like, oh, they're just phenomena of the mind. Like, okay, like, okay, you're seeing a penis, so, it's fine. Maybe something happened, maybe something doesn't, it's fine. We can just, heal you doing these other things. And it's just that we didn't have enough information to go off of. And so it took a long time for all of this stuff to come together and to understand what picture it was showing us. I have been much harder on myself in terms of the doubt, but I'm really grateful that it was a long process because I'm confident now in the picture that I have in front of me, and that is not made up. So that's kind of a very long answer, but I got into therapy because I had a very limited in scope problem. I thought that would be very easy to fix, and then stuff just kept happening and happening. And but I will say, like, as hard as it has been to go through this process and to, once I accepted and understood what happened, to go through the process of EMDR to process the memories, that it's very difficult. More details came up, very physical, like reliving of certain things that I probably in some senses would rather not know, but it's been so helpful as painful as it is to get those pieces in place, it's been so helpful because I couldn't heal until I understood some of what had been happening. Kind of a tangent from your original question, Dave, but I can give an example that I think is actually pretty powerful of why it's very helpful to understand in order to heal. I was aware that every night for years and years, except for like occasionally a night, I would be so exhausted that I would actually sleep mostly through the night, but almost every night I would wake up at the same time, and it was very normal, so I didn't think too much of it. And I would get up and I'd go into the bathroom and I would wash my face, I would groom myself, I would put on makeup, I'd go back to bed, I'd lay in bed, I'd get very uncomfortable. I'd experience a lot of pain that I blamed on my body being weird, whatever, me being too tense. Like I would start having a lot of pain. And then I would be compelled to get up and take a 2-hour bath in the middle of the night. So I would be up basically from like 1 a.m. until 4 or 5 a.m. doing this kind of inexplicable routine. And it wasn't until I finally understood what happened and allowed myself to believe what happened, which again, that was a 1.5 year gap in time. But once I understood what happened, I woke up one night and I thought to myself, I just like had this thought. I was like, because I woke up and I was like compelled towards the bathroom as I always was. And I just had this thought. I was like, I better know what time it is in Greece right now. And I looked up, I don't know the time difference because it's been a long time, but I looked up on one of the time converters, and yes, it was exactly the time of day that I would have been getting ready. Sorry.
It's okay.
It was the exact time of day I would have been getting ready to go to the hotel in the bathroom. And then that I would have then been going to the hotel and having that happen, and then going home and feeling disgusting. And so I finally put together the pieces that, I'm in the bathroom getting ready and trying to make myself like pretty enough, I guess, so that it wouldn't happen, so that I would be a good enough model and that nothing would happen. And once I figured that out, that's what's happening. I'm getting ready, I'm trying to be prettier. Then I'm going and laying back in bed and having body flashbacks. And then I'm feeling disgusting while I'm laying there. And then I go and take a bath. Like once I put all those pieces together, I realized I am reenacting what happens every night without having a clue what was going on. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I realized that, as soon as I looked at the time and put those pieces together, it didn't happen anymore. Unless I'm very anxious about something, I sleep through the night. I don't get up. I don't take baths. I don't, unless something's triggered me, I don't have the body flashbacks. I don't feel compelled to wash myself or make myself look beautiful at 1 a.m. And all it took was understanding the connection between the past and what I was doing in the present, and understanding that I don't need to do that anymore because that's not going to happen. And I'm not in Greece, and I can just go back to bed and go to sleep. Sorry, that was a very big tangent.
Wow, Katie, that is amazing that you put those puzzle pieces together yourself. And in fact, it's also amazing to hear you use the word puzzle pieces, when you put the pieces together like a puzzle, because that is exactly what trauma does. It fragments so much of the experience and in our memories. Then also you're like a textbook example of the body keeping the score, reenacting and feeling those somatic feelings, but having no ties to the reasons for your actions and those recollections. It's so amazing to hear you actually articulate all of this for us. I believe so much that your experience is going to help others put their puzzle pieces together like you are hoping. For the reason you're here, I think that's going to happen, that others will hear this and connect. Katie, are you able to make cognitive connections now besides that one in terms of what your brain is doing with other somatic and physical sensations?
Yeah, I am. That is something that is made a lot more difficult by having aphantasia and not being able to see images except when they are intrusive, which does not happen very often. But it is just kind of going through that process is also putting together a mini puzzle within a puzzle. So as an example, like as my understanding of what like normal EMDR trauma processing looks like is you grab onto something in the present moment that brings you in connection with a whole series of memories that are connected in your brain around an event. And when other people do this, my understanding is it brings up almost like a movie of what happened. They can watch what was happening and they can have the same emotions and thoughts and body sensations and images and all of that comes together like a clear picture. So for me, when I do EMDR, because it's not a situation where I have intrusive images, I'm working with a very limited set of information. So what comes up for me are essentially like cognitive thoughts, but not things that I'm thinking. They just come to me like, I need to get out of here or get me out of here or stop. So those thoughts come up. I will feel physical sensations. So for instance, there's so many different examples to pull from. So I'm trying to think of what one is the best, but one day, well, actually many times that I've gone through EMDR, I've had the same thing happen where all of a sudden I feel tightness around my temples and it feels like my hair is being pulled and I feel my head smashing back into a wall or some kind of hard surface and I get an immediate headache and then I feel other stuff happening in my body at the same time. And then I'll have emotions along with that stuff. And so it almost is a cognitive process where I have to put together what I know about like the big puzzle, which is full of gaps, like it's like an outline of a puzzle, but I know what the picture is supposed to be now at least. And then like filling in those pieces, like, okay, if I'm feeling the sensation in my hair and it feels like my hair is being pulled back and my head is smashing backwards in space because I feel the motion, like I feel physical motion when I remember things and I feel spatial orientation. So I can feel my head flying backward and I can feel the pain that I get and I can feel the sudden stop, like, motion and then stop. It actually is a little bit of a cognitive process of putting all those pieces together, these things, even though I don't have a picture of it. When I'm feeling and thinking and sensing, that all adds up to, okay, they're grabbing my hair and pulling my head backwards. And then, add on to that all of the other body sensations that are happening at the same time. And so it's a combination of a cognitive process and a cognitive understanding. And I have no idea if I answered the question that you wanted me to answer.
It does. And I guess in my limited education of the neuroscience, the cognitive brain and the executive functioning of your brain, having those recall moments of certain body sensations and then connecting it with what must have been going on, then that in turn is making some neuropath connections with your limbic system and the emotion.
Yeah.
And that is in fact from what I understand about therapy, I'm not a therapist. I just talk a lot about therapy and the neuroscience of the brain in trauma. But those connections, those new connections that you're making seem to resolve a lot of the emotional conflict and conundrum and wondering and self-blame and shame. Is that what you're describing here? Is that something
that is 100% true? I don't think the example I gave was the best example of that particular phenomenon, but yes, that is what is happening and that is what is helping. And that is sort of, what that example of waking up in the middle of the night and being able to cognitively piece together what I was doing. And then resolving the terror that in the flashbacks from understanding what was happening and being able to tell myself, have the conversation between the cognitive brain and the limbic system that, hey, this isn't happening right now. It's okay. It's your sweet husband of, sorry, I'm blinking on how many years, but a lot of years. That cognitive, it really is those two sides of the brain talking, or those two different parts of the brain talking to each other and resolving things. And I do have another example. I was also having unrecognized reenactments when I was working, and I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was that every day I felt terrified and I felt like I needed to escape. It would happen in situations where people would ask me to use my expertise to do something, or when I was being praised. And it was such an overwhelming feeling of terror that I actually couldn't take it anymore. and I had to leave work because I didn't know at the time, because these puzzle pieces, I was getting the intrusive images and the nightmares and stuff, but the puzzle had not kind of formed yet. So I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that it felt terrible to be in those situations. And I just needed to get out of that situation. And what was happening once I was able to take a break and get some rest and put together the pieces of the puzzle so that I understood what was happening was those conversations that I would have at work, I was actually setting up to mimic the conversation I had on the beach without having any idea that's what I was doing. That people would come to me and say, hey, we need help on this, we need your technical expertise on this issue. And I would feel like most people, especially most women in the STEM field, get a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't quite know how to do that. I'm not the right person. And I would set up this dynamic where I would be telling the person, dear colleagues, great friends, like almost like family, but I would be telling them like, I'm not the right person for this job that you want me to do. I'm not qualified to do that. Let me help you find somebody else. I don't think I should do this. Like, I would basically be recreating that conversation on the beach where I was saying, I'm not a model. I can't do this. I'm not qualified. I'm not pretty enough. I don't have the right clothes. Find somebody else. And then because everybody knew the quality of my work and knew it was really good, they would reject that. And they'd say, no, you're fine. You're going to be fine. You're exactly who I want. You have the skill set I need. Can you please do this? I need your help. So again, recreating that circumstance on the beach where somebody needs me to do something and I feel like I have to help somebody. So I would do it because one, it was my job, and also like I like to help people. So I would do it, but then I'd feel like I was going to die and like I was walking into a horrible situation without having any. So that's like all the cognitive brain, like the cognitive understanding, like my thinking brain knows what happened on the beach and in the hotel and understands it. Like it understands it up until the point where my memory cuts out. It understands that there was a time that in my brain, I misled some men into thinking I could do this job that they wanted me to do. And then I got there and they were disappointed and angry. And so my cognitive brain kind of stops there. And then like, yeah, the limbic system and the terror and the impending doom all like take over. And like, I have these reactions in my body and in my emotions and just that terror. And there was at that point, no connection between the two. So it was like split, like, okay, cognitively, I know up to here, what's happening. And then body takes over. And it was terrifying. And there was no like good explanation for why it was terrifying. It just was terrifying. And then I would do the thing and I'd feel like I had to do a really good job again, like try to be the best model I can be so that this doesn't happen. So I would go and try to do the best job I could do. I would stay up very late, overachieve in an attempt to make it okay. And then like I get a reputation for doing really good work. And then people would praise me. And then more people would think I was capable. And more people would come to me. And it was just this horrible cycle that I couldn't break because I didn't understand that it was connected to this horrible trauma that I had experienced. And so I haven't experimented with going back to work yet and putting myself back in that situation now that I understand what's happening and that I'm safe. But I will say that being in enclosed conference rooms with multiple colleagues is not a soothing experience when you've gone through what I've gone through. So,
yeah, makes sense
yes.
too.
So, yeah.
And I think it's important to say for our listeners and even for you that what has taken so long, I mean, you're talking about making these realizations starting 5 years ago, but more even impactfully 2 years ago, that process of the connection, then the cognitive brain limbic system part of your brain, those neural path connections don't happen overnight. I don't think anybody should expect that once those cognitive and emotional connections start making sense, that automatically, oh, good, then I don't have to worry about this. No, it's a long process for those neural paths to make those connections and then to actually make even more sense as time goes on. Do you sense that also in your therapy and in your daily life? I
sense that, but I want to clarify that the 5 years, that didn't have to be 5 years and it didn't have to be 25 years. What got in the way, I mean, in addition to like the aphantasia and the dissociation and the possible drugging that happened, what got in the way and made that such a painful and slow process was the doubt that I put on myself. Like when you end your show with Start by Believing, I was starting and ending with disbelieving. Like, I am wrong, I am crazy, I am anxious, I'm making this up, none of this happened. And so if people can be kind enough to themselves to just put that doubt aside and believe what their body and brains are telling them, it doesn't have to be such a long and painful process. What I found was I had all the puzzle pieces that I needed 2 years ago. Once I had enough to overcome like my massive amount of doubt in myself and what was happening, it only took 6 months for me to go from utter just shock, even though I had 2 years to get used to the idea. Once it was 100% crystal clear in my head and I admitted it, it was as if that had just happened the day before in terms of the way that my brain and body reacted. It was just pure, not like psychological shock, but just physical shock. Like I just shut down completely. So from that point to hardly having any symptoms at all, that only took 6 months. Really hard work, but not 5 years. So if people can do themselves that favor.
Let me ask you if you think maybe, Katie, that some of that delay too, and that doubt, and I know it sounds almost to me as though you're blaming yourself, but I really feel like there is some blame that needs to be laid, not because it was maliciously intended upon you, but just the way you were brought up by your mom, to have those neural paths so ingrained in your own head that you yourself weren't important.
Yeah, that was definitely, those are very strong neural pathways that are very challenging to change. And that does not happen in 6 months. But I was raised in a situation where black was yellow. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, it was topsy-turvy, and whatever I thought was not the right thing to think, and whatever I asked was not the right question to ask. I have stronger self-doubt than anybody I've ever met in my life. So it doesn't have to be quite so complicated.
But that has absolutely exacerbated that struggle that you've had with that trauma then with the rape.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's definitely compounded by having complex PTSD.
Yeah.
Not helping the situation.
Katie, what's the future look like for you?
Well, for now, I really liked my job and I really liked the work I was doing. It was very meaningful. And I do want to go back to having a career, whether it's that one or a different one. But I'm also really on top of kind of processing all of this stuff. And I'm really enjoying the time with my family and my young kids. So at least for a couple of years, I'm just going to enjoy not feeling the way that I felt for the past 25 years. I'm going to enjoy feeling really good and enjoy having time with my family where I'm feeling really good and present. And then eventually go back to some kind of career that involves helping people, not in a coercive way, but in a true and honest way. But despite how I sound in terms of my voice right now, my life is fantastic and I'm super happy. And for heard other guests on your show talk about, like, I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but some good things came from it. This hadn't happened, I wouldn't have left my college and I wouldn't have come back home and met my husband and my kids. So I'm just going to enjoy like the serendipity of what happened. And I really enjoy, like, I feel so much more at ease and peaceful and joyful than I did, even 6 months ago. Definitely enjoy that.
Congratulations on that. I'm so happy for that aspect. Although now that we've had this really difficult conversation, I can't just leave it at this. And so it's really important anytime we have a discussion like this where the trauma is relived and revisited, that you then come away from this understanding, first of all, that there may be even more memories that come up now that may be activated you didn't know were there, just because you've started talking about it in a different way and to a different person and in a different setting. Like you said, you've never explained things in a continuum like this before. So that's going to have an impact. I'm just wondering if you were able to tell us, what did you anticipate the rest of your day looking like after you finished this interview?
What I love about your interviews, Dave, and that made it feel comfortable for me to come on here, is that you're so predictable and you ask the same questions. And I love it because that makes me, and I'm sure other survivors, feel very safe to know what's going to happen and what's going to come. I was prepared with activities. I'm going to be meeting an old colleague from the job that I ran away from for lunch right after this. And my normal MO is to not tell anybody that I've done this. And I wanted more than anything to not have to tell my husband that I was doing this. But I knew that with my name out there on this podcast that he deserved to know before I did it. So My husband knows, and he couldn't ask for a better support person than what he's been for me, from the beginning, believing, thanking me for sharing with him, telling me like, yes, I knew something like this happened. I didn't know what it was like. And then he's learned how to know when I'm dissociating or when I'm having flashbacks, and he knows exactly. I just need a stupid like fart joke to get me out of it. And a good laugh. So I will turn, and my husband knows that I did this, and I will turn to him when he comes home. And my kids are more grounding than anything. So I'll pick them up from school pretty soon after lunch. I'm set. I'm golden.
Nice. I like hearing all of that. And as you picture that occurring, do you see it's realistic and that it's fine and that it's wonderful that you do have those opportunities to meet with an old colleague, to rely on your husband, and to relax in your children and obtain that joy from them? Does that seem real to you as you sit here with me right now?
It does seem very real, yeah.
Oh, good.
I cannot imagine it in my mind, though. But cognitively, I know, yes.
Yeah. Katie, thank you so very much. I know this is going to help lots of people. I, again, commend you for your courage and your strength, as I do with all my guests. Would love to invite you to come back again. Could probably revisit this and have a whole nother long discussion.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate that. Yes, of course, I'd be willing to come back. And I really appreciate you trusting that I had the capability to do this, despite the shaky voice, especially in the beginning.
I think what you're doing is awesome. And I know, like I said, thousands of other people will too. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dave. It's been really nice talking to you, and very comfortable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to again thank Katie Stewart for being on the show with me today, especially for her amazing strength and courage in telling her story and sharing her journey in the process of healing. It was an amazing experience to have the opportunity of talking in depth with Katie, and I want to give her my deepest appreciation for the time she spent with me. I hope you, my listeners, gained some insights and inspiration from hearing Katie's sexual assault survival story. I want to give the invitation once more to those of you who've been raped or sexually assaulted and are ready to share your story with others in the pursuit of furthering your own healing and providing some guideposts in helping others heal. Just email me at davemarkel@gmail.com. That's DAVEMARKEL@gmail.com. And we'll talk about the possibility of you being on one of my episodes. I also want to express my gratitude to both my regular listeners as well as those of you who are hearing this podcast for the first time. The time you spent with us here today is greatly appreciated, and I hope you've been uplifted, inspired, and educated by Katie's interview. Please tell everyone you know about this episode and this podcast. And don't forget to rate this episode and subscribe to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Your rating and subscription help this podcast grow, and you'll be doing your part to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Another way to help do this is to start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been affected by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.